She once believed that love was enough to survive anything. When she married him, they had no savings, no property, and no powerful relatives. What they had was hope. She believed that if two people stayed honest and worked hard, life would slowly become better. In the beginning, he also spoke that way. He promised that no matter how hard things became, it would face them together. Their home was small and often noisy with the sounds of the street outside. The roof leaked during rain, and the walls carried the marks of old repairs. Still, she tried to keep it clean and warm. Every morning she woke before sunrise, cooked simple food, and packed his lunch with care. She smiled even when her hands were tired. She believed these small efforts mattered. Money was always short. Some days he came home frustrated because work was slow or payments were delayed. At first, she listened quietly and tried to comfort him. She reminded him that bad times never last forever. She even sold her small gold ring, the only gift from her mother, to help pay rent. She never told him how much it hurt to let it go. She thought sacrifice was part of marriage. Slowly, his tone began to change. The man who once thanked her for standing by him started coming home silent. When he did speak, his words were sharp. He complained about the food, the house, and the noise outside. He stopped asking about her day. If she tried to talk, he brushed her aside as if her words had no value. She noticed how he compared their life to others. He spoke about friends who married women with money or connections. He laughed bitterly and said life had been unfair to him. At first she thought he was just tired. She believed patience would heal things. She didn't know that his disappointment was turning into blame. One evening, when he lost a job opportunity, his anger spilled over. He shouted that nothing in his life worked because of her. The words hit her harder than any slap. She stood frozen, not understanding how love could turn into such cruelty. That night she cried quietly so he wouldn't hear. She didn't want to make things worse. After that, the insults became common. If relatives visited, he joked about her lack of education or poor background. They laughed awkwardly, and she smiled to hide her shame. Inside, something broke each time. She felt smaller, like she was slowly disappearing. Still, she stayed. She believed marriage meant endurance. She worked small jobs when she could, cleaning houses, sewing clothes, and helping neighbors. Every coin she earned went back into the home. She hoped one day he would notice her effort and remember who she was to him. Instead, he grew colder. He started coming home late. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. When she asked where he had been, he accused her of questioning him like a burden. He said she had no right, since she brought nothing into his life. The final day came without warning. His family gathered at the house for a small discussion. She thought it was about finances or plans. She prepared tea and sat quietly in the corner. Her heart beat fast, sensing something was wrong. In front of everyone, he stood up and spoke words she will never forget. He said he was tired of carrying a woman who had no money, no support, and no future. He said marrying her had ruined his chances in life. He called her unlucky. Each word fell like a stone on her chest. She looked around the room, hoping someone would speak for her. No one did. Some avoided her eyes. Others nodded as if they agreed. Her body felt heavy, but her mind was strangely calm, as if it had already accepted what was coming. He told her to leave the house that same night. He said she no longer belonged there. He pushed a small bag toward her and told her to take whatever she could carry. Years of marriage were reduced to a few folded clothes. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She slowly stood up, picked up the bag, and walked to the door. Every step felt unreal. At the door, she paused for a second, hoping he might stop her. He didn't. He turned his face away, already done with her. Outside, the air felt colder than before. The streetlights blurred as tears finally fell. She had nowhere to go and no one to call. Still, she kept walking. She refused to beg or scream. Her pride was wounded, but it wasn't dead. That night, she slept on a borrowed floor in a distant place. She stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of her marriage. She questioned herself again and again, wondering where she went wrong. But deep inside, a quiet voice told her she had done her best. As dawn arrived, she wiped her tears and sat up. Her heart felt heavy, but it was still beating. She didn't know it yet, but this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of a path she never imagined walking alone. The morning after she was thrown out felt unreal. She woke up before anyone else in the house where she had spent the night. The room was small and crowded, and she was lying on a thin mat on the floor. Her body ached, but the pain in her chest was worse. For a few moments she stared at the wall, trying to understand how her life had changed so suddenly. She stood up quietly, folded the mat, and thanked the woman who had allowed her to stay for the night. She didn't want to be a burden. With her small bag in hand, she stepped outside as the city slowly woke up. Shops were opening, people were rushing to work, and life seemed to be moving normally for everyone else. For her, everything felt paused. She walked without direction for a long time. Her feet were tired, but she didn't stop. Stopping meant thinking, and thinking hurt too much. She kept replaying his words in her head, the way he looked at her like she meant nothing. She wondered how love could disappear so completely by afternoon. Hunger reminded her that she hadn't eaten since the previous day. She bought a small piece of bread with the last money she had and ate it slowly, making it last. She knew she had to be careful now. Every coin mattered. Finding a place to stay became her first challenge. She asked around quietly and finally found a tiny room on the edge of the city. It was dark, with cracked walls and a single window that barely let light in. The rent was low, but even that felt heavy on her heart. She paid for 1 week and promised herself she would find work before it ended. The first night alone in that room was the hardest. There was no sound except distant traffic and dogs barking. She sat on the floor and hugged her knees, letting the tears come freely. She wasn't crying because she missed him. She was crying because her life felt empty and uncertain. The next morning, she went out early to look for work. She walked from street to street, asking at small shops, homes, and offices. Some people didn't even let her finish speaking. Others looked at her worn clothes and shook their heads. By evening, her throat was dry and her hope felt thin. Days passed like this. She found small cleaning jobs that paid little but kept her going. Some days she cleaned houses, other days offices late at night. Her hands became rough and her back often hurt, but she didn't complain. She reminded herself that dignity was more important than comfort. Not everyone treated her kindly. Some spoke to her as if she were invisible. Others delayed payment or made excuses. Once, a woman accused her of stealing when something went missing, even though it was later found in another room. She swallowed her pride and stayed quiet. Knowing arguing would only make things worse, at night she returned to her room exhausted. She cooked simple food, sometimes just rice and salt. She avoided mirrors because she didn't like the tired face looking back at her. Still, every morning she woke up and tried again. She told herself that giving up was not an option. She avoided places where she might run into people from her past. The thought of facing questions or pity made her uncomfortable. She wanted no one to see her broken state. She wanted to rebuild quietly on her own terms. One evening, while cleaning an office building late at night, she found an old photo tucked inside her bag. It was from the early days of her marriage, when they both smiled without fear. She stared at it for a long time, then folded it and put it away. She didn't throw it out, but she knew that part of her life was over. Loneliness followed her everywhere. Some nights she spoke to herself just to hear a voice. Other nights she lay awake, wondering if her life would always be like this. She questioned whether she had made the right choices, whether trusting love had been a mistake. Still, something inside her refused to break. Even on the worst days, she held on to a small belief that life had more planned for her. She didn't know what or when, but she believed her story wasn't finished yet. One afternoon, while returning from work, she passed a small library. She went inside, not to read, but to rest for a moment. The quiet space felt comforting. She sat down and closed her eyes, letting her tired body relax. For the first time in days, she felt a little peace as she sat there. She remembered a distant relative she hadn't thought about in years, someone her family rarely spoke of because of old misunderstandings. She brushed the thought aside, thinking it didn't matter anymore. Her focus was on surviving the present. Weeks passed, and life settled into a painful routine. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. The city no longer felt loud. It felt empty. But she kept going, even when her strength felt borrowed. One night, as she returned to her room, she whispered to herself that she would not let bitterness take over her heart. She had lost her home and marriage, but she didn't want to lose herself. She didn't know it yet, but far away, events were already moving. Decisions made long ago were about to return to her life in ways she never expected. For now, all she knew was survival. And sometimes, survival alone was an act of courage. She had settled into the rhythm of survival. Every day felt the same long hours of work, careful budgeting, and nights spent alone in the small, dimly lit room that had become her home. Despite the exhaustion, she refused to complain. She knew that giving in to sorrow would not change anything. Still, deep inside, a small hope lingered, though she did not dare to give it a name. One afternoon, she was cleaning a large office building. It was a late shift, the kind where most workers had gone home, leaving the rooms empty and silent, except for the hum of machines. As she moved furniture and wiped counters, she noticed an envelope lying on a shelf. She picked it up, expecting it to be old papers or junk, but something about it made her pause. The handwriting on it looked familiar. Though she couldn't place it immediately, curiosity overcame her fatigue, and she carefully opened the envelope. Inside, she found papers that mentioned the name of a relative she barely remembered, a distant cousin who had passed away years ago. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She had never been close to this relative. The papers seemed official, with stamps, signatures, and dates. They suggested that she might have a claim to property and money that had been tied up in family disputes for years. Her first reaction was disbelief. How could this be? She had never expected anything from anyone. Her life had been shaped by poverty. She had become accustomed to the idea that fortune and help were for other people, not for her. She sat down on the floor of the empty office, staring at the documents. Trying to make sense of them, she decided to check everything carefully. She visited offices, spoke to lawyers, and asked questions. Each step brought more clarity. Every document confirmed what she had first thought was impossible. She was indeed the rightful heir to property. And assets that had been kept in legal limbo. The realization made her heart pound. Her hands shook as she held the papers, trying to absorb the truth. It was strange for her to feel excitement after so long. Life had been hard, relentless, and cruel. Yet here was a twist she had never imagined. She thought about the tiny room where she slept, the long walks to work, and the nights she cried herself to sleep. Could this really change everything? Could her life truly turn around after so much suffering? She knew she had to proceed carefully. Fortune can be fragile, and trust had been a lesson she had learned the hard way. She met with lawyers who explained her rights, and slowly, piece by piece, the truth became undeniable. There were houses in her name, savings she had never known about, and investments that had grown silently over the years. Money she had never touched, and yet it was hers. Despite the shock, she did not feel the need for immediate celebration. Her life had taught her patience. She knew that rushing or showing off could bring unwanted attention or even envy. She continued her work quietly, balancing the new reality with the old life she had built through struggle. The most striking realization came when she thought about her ex-husband. The man who had thrown her out, insulted her, and dismissed her completely had no idea what was waiting for her. He had believed she would remain poor, struggling, and invisible. And yet, in the shadows of her hardship, fortune had quietly prepared her rise. Her friends and neighbors noticed a subtle change in her. She walked with more confidence, spoke with a steadier voice, and carried herself with quiet dignity. She did not flaunt her discovery. In her heart, she understood that wealth without wisdom or patience could be meaningless. She wanted to ensure that when she stepped into her new life, she did so with clarity, not haste. Some nights she stayed awake thinking about the twist of fate. She thought about how the same life that had pushed her into poverty was now giving her an opportunity for something greater. She wondered if she would have appreciated it as much if it had come without struggle. Somehow, she felt that the hardships had prepared her to value it properly, to make decisions with care rather than recklessness, she began to plan quietly. First, she needed to ensure that the legal processes were complete. She met with advisors, signed documents, and verified claims. Slowly, the assets were transferred into her control. What had seemed impossible just weeks ago was now tangible. She had the keys to houses, access to accounts, and the freedom to build a life that had seemed unimaginable before, even as she stepped into this new world. She did not forget the past. Every step forward was guided by the lessons she had learned in poverty. She remembered the nights she had gone hungry, the people who had ignored her, the loneliness that had become a constant companion. She vowed never to forget how it felt to be powerless. And that awareness shaped every decision she made. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream freely. She imagined a home of her own, a life where she was not dependent on anyone else, in a future where her dignity could no longer be threatened by cruelty or neglect. The excitement was tempered by caution, but it was there. It's undeniable and alive. Her ex-husband remained unaware of all this. He went about his life, still struggling, still thinking of her as someone who had nothing. The thought made her smile faintly. She did not wish revenge, but she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the world was not as small as he had thought. Life had its own ways of correcting the unfairness he had created. She began to take small steps toward a new lifestyle. She repaired her old clothes, bought a few necessities, and cleaned her tiny room with renewed purpose. She felt that even small changes mattered because they symbolized the start of something larger. Her confidence grew slowly, nurtured by both the discovery of her fortune and the resilience she had built over years of struggle. One afternoon, she visited a small bank with some documents she had been advised to check. The staff were polite but formal. When she realized the extent of her access and the security of her inheritance, she felt a surge of relief. It was not just money, it was freedom. She could now make choices she had never been able to make before. She could leave behind the life of uncertainty and start building something she could call her own. Despite all this, she continued to work in small ways, cleaning offices, helping neighbors. Small tasks were not just for money. They were reminders of who she was and what she had overcome. She did not want to forget the lessons of survival. She valued the simplicity of life, even as wealth entered it. Her fortune brought new opportunities. She could invest in property, start a small business, or even help others in ways she had never imagined. But she was careful. Every step was calculated. Every decision was guided by the understanding that wealth, without thought, could vanish as quickly as it had come. In the evenings, she sometimes sat by the small window in her room, looking at the city lights. Life seemed vast and full of possibilities now. The same city that had once felt harsh and unwelcoming now appeared full of promise. She imagined walking through streets where people did not pity her or judge her for being poor. She imagined doors opening to places she had never dared to dream of. She also thought about her ex-husband. Not with anger, but with clarity. She realized that her success was not about proving him wrong. It was about reclaiming her life and dignity. He had discarded her, but life had its own justice. And she had earned her place without cruelty or malice. Her friends who had stayed in touch noticed her transformation. They saw a quiet strength, a calm confidence, and a determination that had been nurtured through hardship. They did not know about the inheritance yet, and she kept it that way. For her, the journey mattered more than the sudden change. She wanted to feel the growth in herself, not just the growth of her wealth. As days turned into weeks, she made plans for the future. She considered education, investing in skills she had always wanted to learn, and building a home where she could live with comfort and pride. She also thought about helping those who had struggled like she had, though she was careful to do it without attracting attention. She wanted to give back, quietly, meaningfully. One morning, she received a letter confirming that all legal matters were finalized. The assets were now fully hers. She held the letter close to her chest, feeling a mix of relief, excitement, and disbelief. It was the kind of moment she had never imagined during those long, lonely nights. She realized that her life had changed, but her values remained the same. She still respected hard work, honesty, and patience. She still valued kindness and quiet dignity. Money had given her freedom, but it had not changed who she was. In fact, it had strengthened her understanding of what truly mattered. The city that had once been indifferent now seemed alive with possibilities. She began to walk its streets with purpose, exploring opportunities and imagining the life she could build. Each step was a reminder that she had survived hardship, endured cruelty, and now had the power to shape her own destiny. She knew that the past could not be erased. The memory of the home she lost, the husband who disowned her, and the nights of hunger and fear would always be part of her story. But those memories no longer brought despair. They were proof of her strength, evidence that she could overcome anything life threw her way. As she closed her eyes at night, she allowed herself to dream fully. She no longer feared the future. Instead, she looked forward to it. Knowing that the twists of fate that had seemed cruel were preparing her for something greater, she felt a quiet certainty that life, with all its unpredictability, was finally giving her a chance to shine. And in the silence of her small room, she smiled softly. For the first time in years, she felt not just hope, but a quiet joy that came from knowing she had survived, endured, and now had the chance to build a life beyond anything she had imagined. She had always imagined wealth as something distant, something other people had while she struggled to survive. But now it was real, sitting quietly in her life like a new companion she was learning to understand. She had spent months quietly learning about her inheritance, confirming each detail and ensuring that everything was in order. She did not want sudden fortune to turn into sudden trouble. Careful steps, patience, and understanding became her guide. The first thing she did was take control of her living situation. She left the tiny, dimly lit room where she had spent so many lonely nights. Though it had been her sanctuary, it was too small for the new life she wanted to build. She found a modest apartment, simple yet safe and comfortable, in a part of the city she had never dared to enter before. The rent was more than she had ever spent in her life, but she no longer worried about every coin. Still, she furnished it simply, not extravagantly. For her, comfort was more important than show. She began investing in herself in ways she had never imagined. She enrolled in courses that had always interested her: management, business basics, and even some creative classes. The idea of learning for herself, not for survival, was liberating. She spent afternoons reading and evenings planning for the future. It was strange to have time for things other than work. But she discovered a new energy she had forgotten existed. Her confidence grew slowly. She began walking through the city with her head held higher, speaking clearly and asserting herself in ways she'd never had before. Where she had once avoided attention, she now faced people with quiet dignity. She realized that fortune alone was not enough for strength. Intelligence and patience had prepared her to use it wisely. Every decision she made carried that quiet confidence. She did not forget the struggles that had shaped her. Every hardship, every insult, and every sleepless night became part of the story she carried with her. They were reminders of her resilience. When she thought of the nights she had gone hungry, or the times she had walked home exhausted from cleaning offices, she felt a mix of sadness and pride. Those experiences had built her. They had taught her endurance, patience, and the value of every small step forward. She began to use her wealth cautiously. She repaired old debts that had weighed on her for years and quietly helped a few people who had once helped her. She did not seek recognition or praise. She simply wanted to ensure that the kindness she had received in small moments was returned. She believed that fortune should not change who she was, should only give her the means to live fully and honorably. Her ex-husband remained a distant thought, a shadow of the past. She did not think of revenge or confrontation, but she could not deny a small curiosity about how he might react to her success. He had thrown her out, called her unlucky, and dismissed her entirely. Now, life had shifted, but she had no desire to make him feel small. The satisfaction she felt was quiet, personal, and complete. She had proven something more important than wealth. She had proven her own worth. Over time, she began to explore opportunities that her old life had never allowed. She purchased a small business with guidance from experts, something she had always dreamed of but thought impossible. The initial days were challenging as she learned to manage staff, inventory, and clients. But her experience of hardship gave her patience and perspective that few others had. She approached problems calmly, making thoughtful decisions instead of rushing. The business began to grow, slowly but steadily, reflecting the careful strategy she had developed from years of struggle. People who had once overlooked her began to notice a change. Neighbors, colleagues, and even acquaintances who had treated her with indifference now observed her with quiet respect. She did not flaunt her wealth or status. Her presence spoke for itself, steady, confident, and dignified. She had learned that true influence comes not from shouting or showing off, but from quietly owning one's life and choices. She also began to think about the future she wanted beyond material comfort. She wanted a home that reflected her values, a place of warmth, safety, and dignity. She invested in a small, comfortable house, not grand, but enough to feel like a sanctuary. The walls were painted in soft colors, the rooms filled with light, and every detail chosen with care. It was a home where she could finally feel at peace, a place where she could rest without fear, a place that was entirely hers. Her relationships changed too. She reconnected with a few friends she had lost touch with during the years of struggle. These friendships were different now, not based on convenience, but on mutual respect and understanding. She found joy in conversations that were not about survival or money, but about ideas, dreams, and growth. The simple act of being heard and valued felt revolutionary after years of being ignored and dismissed. Despite her success, she remained humble. Every time she faced challenges in her business or personal life, she reminded herself of her journey. She remembered the nights she had walked alone in the rain, the days she had gone without food, and the moments she had felt invisible. These memories were not scars, they were lessons, guiding her to act with patience, compassion, and careful judgment. One morning, she received an invitation to a community event gathering where local entrepreneurs and business people met. She hesitated at first, feeling the old insecurity stir, but she remembered her growth and decided to attend. The event was filled with people from a world she had never imagined being part of. Conversations flowed around her, filled with opportunities, ideas, and ambitions. She felt a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. At the event, she realized how far she had come. People spoke to her politely, often with curiosity and respect. She answered questions confidently, shared insights, and even offered advice where she could. She noticed some glances of recognition from people who had once underestimated her, but she did not let it affect her. She walked through the room with quiet pride, knowing that her presence alone was proof of her journey. Her ex-husband, by coincidence, attended the same event. She saw him from a distance, talking to others, unaware that she was there. He did not recognize her immediately, and she did not approach him. Instead, she observed quietly. She noticed the surprise when he did realize who she was. His expression shifted from casual confidence to shock, and for a moment, she allowed herself a small, private satisfaction. She did not confront him, and she did not speak of the past. The encounter was brief, but it confirmed something she had always known. Her worth had never depended on his approval or rejection. Life had a way of balancing itself, and now the balance was clear. She had grown beyond the limitations that others had imposed on her. Returning home that evening, she felt a sense of calm triumph. She had faced poverty, humiliation, and rejection, and now she stood firmly in a life she had built for herself. The city lights shimmered outside her window, reflecting a world that no longer intimidated her. She knew that challenges would continue to come, but she also knew that she had the strength, wisdom, and resources to face them. Her evenings became a time for reflection and planning. She wrote down goals, considered future investments, and thought about ways to help others quietly. She wanted her life to have meaning beyond comfort and wealth. She wanted to create opportunities for those who had no one to guide them, just as she had once struggled alone in the weeks that followed. Her life settled into a rhythm that balanced work, learning, and personal growth. She learned to navigate financial decisions, manage her home, and build her business with confidence. Every success was rooted in the hard lessons of her past. The woman who had once been discarded, ignored, and humiliated now moved through life with grace, intelligence, and quiet authority. She often reflected on the strange twists of fate. The same world that had treated her cruelly had now given her chance after chance, opportunity after opportunity. She realized that her struggle had not been a punishment, but a preparation. Each moment of suffering had taught her endurance, patience, and the ability to recognize real value. She no longer feared the opinions of others. She had learned that true strength came from within, from a clear mind and a determined heart. She no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone, including her ex-husband. Her confidence was not loud. It was steady, rooted in her journey and her choices. Her future seemed wide open now. She began considering possibilities she had never dared to dream of: expanding her business, learning more skills, traveling to new places, and creating a life that was fully her own. Each decision was deliberate, each step measured, but the freedom she felt was exhilarating. She realized that the most important fortune she had gained was not money. It was self-respect, independence, and the knowledge that she could survive and thrive despite life's worst challenges. Wealth had opened doors, but her character, patience, and wisdom had given her the keys. As she sat in her new home one evening, watching the sun set over the city, she allowed herself to feel proud. She had built a life from nothing, rising above rejection, humiliation, and loneliness. She had discovered a strength she never knew existed, and she had learned that life, though unpredictable, had a way of rewarding perseverance. For the first time, she felt truly at peace. Her fortune had arrived, yes, but it was the combination of her resilience and opportunity that had changed everything. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but now she faced them with confidence, clarity, and the quiet certainty of someone who had endured the worst and survived. And as night fell, she smiled softly to herself. The world was no longer something to fear. It was a place she could shape, a place where she could finally belong, a place where her life built from struggle and courage could flourish. Months had passed since her life had begun to change. The tiny room she had once called home was now a distant memory. And her business, small though it was, had started to grow steadily. Her days were full of purpose and activity, yet she never forgot the struggles that had brought her here. Each morning she woke. She reminded herself that her strength came not from wealth alone, but from every hardship she had endured. One bright morning, she received an invitation to a public event, a gathering of influential people in the city. It was an awards ceremony for local business owners and entrepreneurs, celebrating achievements that inspired others. At first, she hesitated. Public gatherings had always intimidated her, and she was not used to being seen. But she realized that this was an opportunity, not just to attend, but to step fully into the life she had built. She dressed carefully in clothing that was elegant but not flashy. She wanted to feel confident, not conspicuous. As she arrived at the venue, she felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement. The room was large, filled with people she had only seen in passing or read about. Her pulse quickened, yet she walked steadily, reminding herself that she belonged here just as much as anyone else. As the ceremony began, she listened to speeches and applauded achievements. Her mind wandered briefly to the past nights of hunger, days of humiliation, and the constant uncertainty that had defined her life. She felt a quiet gratitude for the journey, realizing that each painful step had prepared her. For this moment, it was during the final announcements that her name was called. She had been nominated and was about to receive recognition for her business and contributions to the community. As she walked to the stage, she felt the weight of her past lift slightly. Every step was a reminder that she had not only survived but had created something meaningful with her own hands. The applause was genuine, warm, and surprising. She smiled, acknowledging the people around her, but her mind remained calm. She did not need validation from anyone else. The recognition was simply a reflection of her efforts, patience, and perseverance. The certificate she received symbolized more than achievement. It was a testament to resilience. courage, and self-belief. As she stepped down from the stage, she noticed a familiar figure standing across the room. Her heart skipped a beat. It was him, the man who had once discarded her, the one who had called her unlucky and thrown her out of his life. His expression froze as he recognized her. Eyes wide with shock, she did not approach him, and she did not allow her emotions to control her. She watched quietly, noting the disbelief in his stance, the surprise that she now walked confidently and carried herself with grace. He had expected her to remain invisible, struggling and small. Instead, she had grown into someone he could not ignore. She felt a sense of calm triumph. The anger and pain she had once carried had transformed into quiet strength. Her success was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her future. She realized that the world had finally reflected back the respect and value she had always deserved. In the following days, she reflected on the encounter. She knew that her ex-husband might try to reach out, perhaps out of regret or curiosity, but she had no need to reconnect. The past had its lessons, and the present was hers to shape. She focused on her business, her learning, and the relationships that nourished her spirit. She understood that true fulfillment came from living authentically, not from proving anything to someone who had already rejected her. Her fortune and recognition opened doors she had never imagined. She expanded her business carefully, hired trustworthy staff, and even began mentoring others who were struggling to find their footing. She remembered how it felt to be ignored, underestimated, and dismissed. Each act of support she offered was intentional, a way to help someone else find confidence and opportunity as her life continued to flourish. She embraced experiences she had never thought possible. She traveled to new places, met inspiring people, and engaged in projects that fueled her creativity and intellect. She learned that life was not only about survival or material comfort. It was about growth, connection, and the pursuit of meaningful goals. She maintained a quiet humility, always remembering the nights she had cried alone and the days she had walked the streets with nothing. Her wealth had given her comfort, but it was her character, resilience, and wisdom that shaped her true success. She became a person who could inspire, not through flamboyance, but through authenticity and dedication. Occasionally, she thought about the man who had once been her husband. She did not hate him, and she did not seek to humiliate him. Instead, she understood that his actions had allowed her to discover her strength. If he had supported her from the start, she might not have realized the depths of her resilience or the courage she carried within. His rejection had, in a strange way, been a catalyst for her transformation. Months turned into a year, and she continued to build a life of dignity and purpose. She established a home that was a sanctuary, a place of comfort, light, and peace. She nurtured friendships, engaged with her community, and invested in her own knowledge and skills. Each day reinforced the truth she had discovered that life could be cruel, but it could also be unexpectedly generous. Rewarding those who endured and believed in themselves, she occasionally walked through the city streets, remembering how they had once felt harsh and unforgiving. Now, they felt full of possibility. Every shop, every corner, every familiar path reminded her of the journey she had taken, the struggle, the patience, and the perseverance that had carried her from poverty to freedom. Her story began to inspire others, quietly at first, then more openly. People who had faced rejection, humiliation, or hardship saw in her journey a reflection of their own potential. She shared her experiences not to boast, but to show that resilience, patience, and integrity could transform a life. Her wealth, recognition, and achievements became tools to empower, not to dominate. She never forgot the lessons of the past. Each hardship had taught her empathy, humility, and the importance of self-reliance. She knew that anyone could lose everything in a moment, but she also knew that survival and growth were possible with courage and perseverance. These truths guided her decisions, ensuring that she remained grounded despite her newfound fortune. One day, she walked past a neighborhood where she had once struggled to find work. She paused, looking at the streets with a mixture of nostalgia and understanding. The place that had once symbolized fear and uncertainty now reminded her of strength and endurance. She realized that every moment, even the painful ones, had contributed to the life she now led. Her confidence, however, never became arrogance. She remained approachable, kind, and patient with others. She understood that true strength was not measured by wealth or status, but by the ability to face challenges, lift others, and act with integrity. People were drawn to her, not because of her fortune, but because of the calm power she radiated. In the evenings, she often reflected on her journey. She thought about the tiny room where she had once cried herself to sleep, the offices she had cleaned for pennies, and the rejection she had faced. Each memory reminded her of how far she had come and reinforced her commitment to continue growing, learning, and living with purpose. Her ex-husband eventually realized the truth of her transformation, but by then, it no longer mattered. She had moved beyond seeking validation from him or anyone who had doubted her. Her life was defined by her choices, her resilience, and the opportunities she had created. She had reclaimed her story, and it was hers to write however she wished. She also began to embrace joy, something she had not allowed herself to feel fully for years. She celebrated small victories, cherished meaningful relationships, and pursued passions that had long been dormant. Life, she realized, was not only about surviving, but about thriving, creating, and finding moments of happiness, even amid responsibility. Her success became a testament to the power of endurance, patience, and self-belief. She had endured rejection, humiliation, and poverty, yet she emerged not bitter, but empowered. She had transformed her misfortune into opportunity, proving that the human spirit could endure and flourish against the odds. In the quiet moments of reflection, she often smiled softly to herself. She had learned that life's challenges were not the end, they were a beginning. The strength she had discovered, the opportunities she had embraced, and the dignity she had claimed were more valuable than any fortune. She had survived, she had grown, she had finally found her place in the world. As she looked out her window at the city lights one night, she felt a deep sense of peace. Her life was no longer defined by rejection or poverty, but by resilience, purpose, and fulfillment. She had created a life of meaning, and she knew that her journey, though difficult, had prepared her to embrace every future possibility with courage and confidence. Her story became a quiet inspiration, proof that even after being disowned, humiliated, and left in poverty, one could rise to a life of dignity, success, and self-worth. She had learned that fortune is not only about money, but also about courage, patience, and the ability to reclaim one's life. And as she closed her eyes that night, she smiled, knowing that she had not only survived, but had transformed her destiny entirely.